Welcome to the Defuse Podcast with host Philip Grindell, CEO and founder of Defuse, a global threat and intelligence consultancy that blends psychology and intelligence to mitigate threats and risks to prominent people and brands.
Hello and welcome again to another edition of the Defuse Podcast. This one I always say this, I know every time, but I'm really excited about this because I've got a good friend, Benjamin Barrontine. So Ben and I met when I was in Montana at a threat assessment conference, and Ben and his team were also there, also presenting. And he's got a pretty interesting backstory. And it's interesting because he knows his subject from being on both sides of the fence in terms of being an adversary, using it tactically, but also defending against it. And I think that gives him a really unique perspective in terms of how is an adversary going to use this, because he's done that. So very briefly, Ben spent 15 years in the US military, everything from being an infantry soldier to serving in their special operations, intelligence, extensive experience, as I've said, with social engineering, digital exploitation and cyber targeting. He's worked with the NSA National Security Agency, the US Marshals and NASA. And then he moved into the private sector with 360 Privacy, who are a company that I use. They're a fantastic bunch of guys and a great company. Ben, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, glad to be here. So
I've given you a brief introduction. What would you say? How would you describe yourself? What would you, if you were, or if I say if you were, I am asking you, what is your background? How did you come to be skilled in this area? What's the story?
Yeah. So again, military, kind of made my way up through special operations and found myself in the signals intelligence realm and loved it. Right. So that's a very tech enabled world. And I, kind of thrived once I moved over into that space, and absolutely loved it. Everything from computers to cell phones to social media, everything online, the interconnectivity of it all was fascinating. And so eventually found myself building out, as this kind of digital targeter throughout different countries. And I like to say that, and I tell clients, it was my job to find out where bad guys live, who they hang out with, where they hang out, and how long they hang out there. So it was kind of like a stalker, right? A digital stalker, putting these pieces together and then handing them over to whatever team that was requesting it. And it was so much fun because it was almost like putting a puzzle together. It's that investigative itch, and so I did that for a number of years. I kind of then came up with we call it, the digital protection program, where start teaching other commanders, ambassadors, embassy workers, special operators that were going out the door as well, how to protect themselves from people like me, near peer adversaries. And it always kind of blew my mind how, I wouldn't say how easy, but the ways that we were able to kind of exploit certain targets with all of the tech-enabled services around us. So I started stripping away what we were actually doing to be able to get into the inner circle or get into certain networks. And at the end of the day, it comes down to the human, right? So we, social engineering and whatnot, obviously tech-enabled social engineering. We started coming up with a program on how to defend ourselves, and did that for a number of years. And then obviously brought that same program to 360 Privacy, and here we are. But it's been a wild ride, very fortunate, and I absolutely love the topic. So again, thanks for letting me be here.
So when you went from the kind of infantry into the special ops teams and then signal intelligence, would you describe yourself as a techie? Are you a technical person?
I would say I would never. I'm never going to be the most technical person in the room, And if I feel like if I ever am the most technical person in that room, I should probably find a different room, right? But I've always loved tech, right? I would like to say that I've found a nice balance between the tech and the physical world. I always loved playing and playing with like the little gadgets and taking things apart and putting them back together as a kid. All the science was one of my favorite subjects. but then also how things work, right? That was always kind of that itch. And I think that obviously helped me when it moved over to the tech world. But also I've got clients that, they'll call me a hacker, and I was be the first person that's like, no. That's a whole different breed. And those people, the people that are able to do that are exceptional. But it's being able to, I'd like to think that I've found a way, or I found a home where it is tech and the human element, right? How to apply very simple technical capabilities to the human element. And that's where I am, right? I know just enough to be dangerous, a jack of all trades kind of thing, but not really hyper specific, like, the true hackers and whatnot that you see online in the Hollywood makes look super sexy.
Yeah. But I guess you must have had an inquisitive mind, because if you're looking at, what makes things work and how do we use that from an offensive and also, now you flip it onto a defensive perspective in terms of, okay, well, how do we stop ourselves being victims of that? That requires a degree of inquisitiveness, of being open-minded, of being wanting to practice things and strip things away and all that, as you weren't mentioning it yourself. So you must have that innate quality anyway, or interest anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you start thinking about it. I remember when I started developing, the quote unquote digital protection program, is okay, how are we really doing this? And then you just kind of linearly look at the attack surface. And then, okay, well, here's this defense mechanism. Well, how would I defeat that? And it's just kind of go backwards, one step and one step and one step, until finally we kind of figured out where that line is, where, okay, well, if you can do this, it prevents 7 different outcomes. And so that's where we, started with, essentially the human element, the education piece, phishing and all that kind of stuff, the human enablement of a lot of these exploits. But yeah, it was definitely the clockwork of, okay, how do I fix this? And then very analytical, backwards planning, figure out where the soft spots, I have a whole talk on becoming a hard target. And so to become a hard target, you have to fill those soft spots, those weak areas in your digital footprint or physical footprint, depending on which side of the house you're on. But on the digital side, we're hemorrhaging data all the time, right? We're carrying cell phones, laptops, we have Facebook, social media. But then, when I saw that, I just became infatuated with it. Like you said, trying to figure out where those soft spots are, being able to fill them, and then just seeing by doing 3 or 4 very trivial things to protect yourself, it makes the world of a difference.
So we're going to get into some of the terminology and the real basic stuff in a minute. But can I, if you've got somebody like, you're protecting a client, or, you mentioned ambassadors, etc. Presumably, though, if you've got the Chinese state coming after you or the Russian state coming after you, there's not a lot that you and I can do, or the average person, or even the average nation state can do to protect from that.
Correct. Right. And so we tell clients too all the time, what we're going to be teaching you and what we're going to be doing is going to protect you from 99% of attacks coming in, right? Your small criminal organizations, your everyday exploiter, the kid down the street that's just bored and living in his mom's basement, little things like that, where 99% of the issues we see come from. But right, if a nation state is coming after you, that's a whole other animal, right? Because of the way that they are enabled and their ability to manipulate either networks or the funding that they have for certain exploits. A lot you hear all the time, Pegasus and these 0-click exploits that are always in the news. Once you start diving into that world, it becomes something much greater, much harder.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start with the basics then. We've chatted about this, and I think there's lots and lots of terminology that's in our daily conversations, I suppose, when we're talking about security, and we're talking particularly about cybersecurity. But I'm not always convinced that everyone's on the same page. I'm not always convinced everyone really understands what some of those terms means. And I think quite often we're all too embarrassed to say, sorry, what does phishing mean, and what does this mean, and what's a whale then, and all this sort of stuff. So can we go through some of the the sort of terms that you come across on a daily basis, and just kind of explore them. And in layman's terms, we call, I don't know if you've got the same, but in the UK we call it the idiot's guide to whatever. And I'm happy to be an idiot because I'm not hugely technical, believe it or not. So, let's start with phishing. What is phishing? What does it mean, and how do they do it?
Right. So, phishing, just a really easy way to put it is, we all get those emails. They're wanting you to click a link, right? They're phishing. They're trying to get you to enable an exploit, right? So they want you to click a link, open a file, whatever it may be, in order to put the malware, let's say, on your device, right? So that's something that I like to call, it's human enabled, right? You are clicking it. There has to be something that's done on the device for that malware to be activated, and it's always the human aspect of it, right? And so it can be either a text message, it can be an email, it can be a DM in your Facebook or whatever it may be. They come in all sorts of sizes and shapes, and especially with AI now, it's getting harder and harder to actually to see it. And so that's why we really put the emphasis on the education of the person, of the client, to actually see it, look at it, and be able to recognize it. But the phishing as a whole is just playing off of a human's, ignorance to click to something, right? Because of just exactly what you're saying, right? Oftentimes we as humans, no one wants to raise their hand and say, hey, I need help. Hey, I don't know what this means. And so, attackers are playing off that. They want you to be ignorant, and they want you to not ask for help. And so they're trying to get you to enable their malware, their exploit.
So why would somebody try and phish me? I mean, as just a kind of normal bloke on the street, why would they, are they targeting me, or is it just a mass marketing thing? And why are they targeting me? Why am I being phished?
So the way I teach it, there's kind of two different philosophies here, two phases of an exploit, right? So you have opportunistic targeting, which is you're on a list with 100,000 other email addresses or phone numbers, and all 100,000, 10,000, however many people are getting the same email, they're getting the same traffic, and they're just hoping, literally phishing, think of like a big net, right? They're phishing for someone to click those links. They're looking for a soft target. Now, you may click it once or twice, and now you are identifying yourself as a soft target. And once you do that enough, you're going to go from just that big open list, which everyone gets, not necessarily you, just an opportunistic targeting list. Once you've identified yourself as being susceptible and being a soft target, a weak target, now that's going to go into directed targeting, right? Now you are actually going to be targeted as a person, and that's where they're going to start building out a pattern of life on you. Think of it like a targeting package, your likes, dislikes. You may start getting targeted emails from, you may be looking at, with your cookies, right? So you've all been on Facebook and you see, hey, I was looking up pack and plays or baby items in another tab. Well, on your Facebook, you're getting ads for those, right? That's all building out your pattern of life and who you are. And as an attacker, if I'm going after you, I'm going to start using that against you and sending you emails, maybe a 5-10% discount code for whatever baby item it is. And you're going to say, oh, awesome. I was actually just looking for that, to get you to click that link. And it could be either for credential stealers, which is, where they're it's a fake login page. They're going to you're trying to give out your email address or your password. It could be anything from bank accounts, credit card numbers, whatever it may be. But that's where it is. They're playing off of you to click that link.
And so, where do they get our details? These lists, is that where kind of breach data, where they bought it on lists that are sold on dark web and all that sort of stuff, where when our data is accessed and sold, that's where they generate the list from?
Yes and no. So oftentimes it is on those data breaches, right? But it doesn't have to be, depending on the country. Here in the States, we have data brokers. There's hundreds and hundreds of data brokers that will sell everything from your home address to your social security number to your email address, your phone number, and then it links it to your entire network of people, family, friends, everyone, which with 360 we get rid of. But then in other countries, like we were talking about earlier, where you don't necessarily have the data brokers, it is all about data breaches. And it's about scouring the deep and dark web and looking for what is out there. What can I do to connect you or connect to you, right? And then once I can reach out and establish that connection to you and reach out and touch you, I'm going to start building out around you as well, right? For instance, the MGM breach that's been in the news over the last month or two, that was a social engineering breach, right? That was they were able to get an employee's information and then call the help desk and social engineer the help desk into giving them information. It was very simple. I believe it was a 10-minute phone call that cost millions upon millions of dollars. Wow. And that was just from basic information they were able to find on either the dark web, deep web, or sometimes just OSINT, open source intelligence, grabbing it.
So what are we looking for? If we get an email or we get a text message, how do we know? So one of the examples I was going to use actually is what about when you get an email address from somebody you know, for instance, a friend or someone, but it's not actually them?
Right. So they're either email spoofing or spoofing the header, whatever it may be. And those are hard, right? That's where it comes down to either knowing that person, right? Does the syntax seem weird? Are they asking for something that's odd? We see a lot of times, you'll get the text messages from your boss. And again, my name is Ben or, Benjamin, but I know that, Adam, this founder CEO of 360 Privacy here, if he texts me, he's not going to say, "Hey, Benjamin, I need you to go get me something," right? And so just kind of knowing that, and that's where it comes down to the human to see that, because again, AI is getting so advanced that some of these are being written well, but they're not necessarily being written to me, right? Because of that syntax. Other things you can look for will be, it may look like it's coming from me with my name, but if you look at the email address will be wrong. Or when you're looking at the email, the body of the email, look for grammar mistakes. That's where we see those a lot. Punctuation is a little off, or maybe it's the punctuation is overused, right? Because shorthand, right? If you're talking to someone that very few times am I making sure that I'm going back and making sure it's grammatically correct. If I'm sending it to my buddy or a coworker, a peer at work, at least just asking for something general, I'm not going to submit it as if I would an English literature paper, right? Mm-hmm. But oftentimes the AI generative emails and whatnot, they're overdone. They're too perfect, right? That as in life, if you're thinking about it in the physical world, nothing really in nature is a perfect circle or perfect in general. There are flaws, whereas human nature is the same thing, right? And so looking for something that just looks off, looks odd. I like to tell clients to develop their spidey sense, right? If it feels wrong, generally it is wrong. There's another philosophy of we in the physical world, right? You go to a bad part of town, you're in the woods, something that feels wrong. Your situational awareness as a human in the physical world, you have your entire life, ever since you're a baby, you're taught, hey, this is good, this is bad, this feels wrong, and your intuition starts kicking in. The goosebumps starts coming out on your skin. You're like, this feels weird. The tech world is so new, and a lot of times you don't feel that. It's harder to fill that space. And again, exploiters are going to use that against us. But developing that same sense of self-awareness on the tech side, on the digital space that you do in the physical space, I think is step one, right? Mm-hmm. It's by far the biggest defender is ourself and our consciousness.
Sure. So if we move then from phishing to whaling, what's whaling then? What's that mean?
So with whaling, I'm going to be honest with you. You can take this out too. Yeah. I don't have a great definition for whaling.
But is it more kind of CEO stuff and targeting bigger fish, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. As far as, okay. So Whaling would be going after, again, a bigger target, the CEO, the top-down approach. Phishing oftentimes happens from the bottom up. Right. So you're looking for the support system, and it's mass marketing, whether it be whaling or spear phishing or whatever it may be, where it becomes more targeted to the CEO, to the C-suite, to someone that's a bigger prize, more at risk. Oftentimes that what I've seen is that comes later. Once there has been the support system has been attacked. One thing that we see are executive assistants, HR, payroll, people that generally have access and placement to the same information as the CEO, but generally are not as well protected. Right. One thing that we've seen in C-suites and a lot of companies, corporations, there's a lot of money that's been spent for good reason to protect the C-suite. And then oftentimes the EA or that support system, they're not as well protected. But as an exploiter, I know they probably have the same logins. They have the credit card information. So that's where I'm going to go to.
Yeah. And one of the things I always think about when I'm looking at LinkedIn as an example is when people are advertising their new jobs. Look at me. I'm just taken over the new directorship of ABC company. And I speak from experience in terms of a relative of mine did that on LinkedIn, and we noticed that within a couple of days, all of a sudden was getting loads of emails and loads of connections targeting that individual because they had a new role. So I'm guessing, that's a kind of vulnerability in terms of, I go back to a story years ago when I was looking after Heathrow Airport, and we had this new runway that was being developed and what have you, and the directors were getting targeted, and they had a brand new director come in, and somebody contacted the CEO's secretary to say, I am this brand new director, but I've lost the boss's phone number, or I don't think I've got it actually. Could you share it with me? Because this individual was brand new and hadn't necessarily met everyone, they just gave out the number. So, you need to know it. It's this. And it was actually one of the activists. And the CEO then just got completely swamped, and he had to change his number in the end because it just got exploited so often. But so this goes back to kind of, we're giving out lots of information blind to the fact that what we think might be innocent actually is good tactical information for our adversaries.
Right.
So, what are they looking for when we're blindly sharing our information, other than the obvious emails, etc.? What do they go for? What are they looking for to target, particularly when they're targeting the bigger fish, looking at the private clients, looking at the CEOs or high profile individuals?
They're looking for to kind of get back to, it ties into what we were talking about earlier, those connections, right? We as individuals are especially in 2023, we are so connected to one another, right? We have to be available for someone to reach us at all times. I can remember being in school when, cell phones first started coming out, especially, post 9/11, you couldn't have a cell phone on you in school. You couldn't have, it was poor form to have a cell phone out or on you at all times. Now, it's irresponsible not to have a cell phone on you at all times and be able for someone to reach out and touch you. As an exploiter, I'm looking for those connections. I'm trying to figure out a way to bridge over, because once I can reach out and touch you, now that's a connection. I like to call them pivot points in the intelligence space. If we think about email signatures, right? So email signatures, it'll always be generally its name, your position, the company you work for, your email address, and then there's usually a work number and then a cell phone number. If you put your personal cell phone number in your signature block, at least, in the States, those data brokers, it's so easy just to go take everything just from that signature block, first name, last name, and then your phone number, put it in. 9 times out of 10, it's going to pull back your home address. Because what do we do when we sign up for rewards points, grocery stores, gym memberships? These are not credit card information kind of stuff. This isn't something that's going to touch your credit. These are very trivial things you're signing up for, but it's always your mailing address, phone number. And so that are all going to tie in together. for that. And then also playing off of, like what you're saying, the human element of, I know this person's new. We as a human being, I'm eager to please someone. And so what I want to do is I want to give out. Absolutely. I don't want to get in trouble. There's a great book that talks about the truth default theory, where we as humans essentially lie more than we think we do, but we as humans also believe people more than we should. We think that people are always telling the truth more than they are. And what that causes is for, like you said, the executive assistant, why would someone, there's probably no way in her mind or that person's mind thinking that, oh, this is malicious, right? Who would do that to me? If I had a nickel for every time, and I'm sure you've seen it too, every time a client says, nah, I'm no one, who would look at me? Why would someone come after me? But as a targeter, that's exactly who I'm going to go after, because they don't have that awareness as high. They don't think they're being targeted. And so that truth default theory starts kicking in and saying, oh no, this email has to be real. This phone call has to be real.
And then how do we use all this data then when we're looking at generating fake IDs? I mean, we do a lot of, as you know, we do a lot of these vulnerability assessments, and we're finding people's personal data and then saying to them, this can be used to create fake IDs. So how do people do that then?
Right. So when you're going in, let's say I can build out, I find enough of your information. Well, now I can go to Gmail and I'm going to create a Gmail account with your first name, last name. I'm going to put your real phone number in. They may do a two-factor authentication or verification, which is great now. I try to get everybody to get onto two-factor. But if I can build out, not necessarily about you, right? So let me build out to your sister or your brother or maybe your neighbor, right? I know that I see that you just moved somewhere, right, into a neighborhood. Well, now I'm going to go and I'm going to try not necessarily to get your information, but your new neighbor's information. I'm going to build out this profile on them to contact you with, and do the same thing like what that other exploiter did is, hey, I live 2 houses down. Welcome to the neighborhood. What's your phone number? Let's catch up. Or I need to drop off something. I actually got some of your mail. Is it okay if I drop it off? Whatever it may be, just to get you to believe. As soon as I can get you to believe something or get you to trust me, then it's just a matter of time of that those spidey senses to start kicking in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I've seen the most is, and getting people into the mindset of, yes, they're targeting you, but not necessarily in the way that you think, right? They're going to be targeting your support system around you to get you to do something because someone you already trust and know.
Right. Yeah. So when we used to, in the police, when we used to target people with undercover officers, as an example, we'd never put the undercover officer directly next to target. You'd feed them in through a vulnerable person, an informant, or someone who was in debt, or somebody that you knew was a vulnerability, and you'd feed them in that way. So it's the same sort of thing in terms of they're not necessarily coming direct for you; they're coming around your network and then slowly building in towards you.
Exactly. When it comes out to, another thing, your pattern of life, and your electronic pattern of life, EPOL. So everywhere that your cell phone touches, right? Wi-Fi, when you're reaching out and touching routers, you're leaving like the digital signature. Well, our cell phones, for instance, right? What's the point of having a smartphone if it doesn't do all the smart things that you want? Right. So when it goes into, you go home, you go to your office or your partner's house, whatever it may be, it automatically connects to the Wi-Fi, right? And we love that. It's easy access. It's great. Well, what that's doing is your cell phone has a preferred networks list. So it says, hey, you're my friend. I trust you already. I'm going to connect. There are a number of vulnerabilities attached to that, but the one, for in this instance, is if I, as an attacker, can get my hands on your preferred partner or your preferred networks list, now the old days of trying to follow you and surveillance and all that kind of stuff we see from the movies, that goes out the window. I already know where you're going to be based off your human element, right? Through your electronic pattern of life. And so if I am sitting at a coffee shop that I know that you like going to just by ripping it off your phone or whatever it may be, now your brain is already saying, okay, this person was already here when I got here. So you trust them, right? So that's something you can trust. Same with what you're saying. If someone is brought into your circle by a trusted person, you trust them by default just because, hey, if you trust them, I trust them. And as a targeter, you're playing off of that human element of trust and over trusting.
So are you saying there that when your phone, so as you're walking down, the high street or whatever else, your phone is basically kind of reaching out and touching or connecting with free Wi-Fi services, if you haven't got the right settings or Bluetooth settings, etc. But do you then have to hack into that in order to get that information, or is there a different way to exploit it?
Not necessarily hacking in, right? And like again, most of the time where in the movies where you see the hacker and the lines of code, although that is very real in some instances, oftentimes these very trivial hacks or exploits are just that, trivial, right? We have a mismanaged settings on your phone, and we are willingly giving out this information. There's a number of open source tools, you can, for one of the more basic is Wireshark. You can throw a packet out or grab a packet, throw it into Wireshark and be able to get those preferred networks, because we are willingly giving them out. And oftentimes we want to give it out because of the ease of access. Technology is great. I love it. I love AI, as long as we have certain things implemented to protect ourselves. Absolutely. One of my favorite quotes is, "The last to adapt is the first to perish." And so by us fighting tech, we're kind of putting ourselves in a bad spot there. But with tech-enabled services, our phones, they're set up to where they all want to interconnect, which is great. But from a security standpoint, we're kind of putting ourselves in a predicament there where you got to find that balance of where you want to be with safety, security, and ease of access and comfortability. And that's up to the end user, right? I've got some clients that they want to go back to the old flip phones or not even use phones, but then obviously in our line of work, we have celebrities, pro athletes, people that are influencers, where that's not an option, right? And so you have to come up with a plan for them to use their phone and stay connected to the world, but just put up those boundaries. And that looks a little bit different person to person. But yeah.
So when you take on a client then, and you're going to do the security briefing that you guys do, and you're going to, I know that you go and physically meet people or go and do an assessment of their home, and you do a whole kind of wraparound service. Talk us through that. What are you looking to do with them? What's the sort of first steps that the kind of basics about what you're trying to educate them on?
So the first thing that we try to do when we go in is just make the client understand that they are vulnerable, right? Oftentimes clients will say, "Hey, I'm a nobody," or "Why would people want to come after me?" And so we kind of try to paint that picture of, the why, right? Once a person can understand the why, then it's much easier to teach them and put things into perspective and paint a different picture for them. I like to go from a macro to micro type of education, where we're saying, hey, this is the world in which we live. Here are all the bad things that could happen, from cell phones, laptops, financial fraud, ID fraud. And you just kind of start asking those questions as, what's important to you? Oftentimes it is identity theft, it's reputation management, or financial loss. Those are kind of the big three. And so getting them to answer questions like that and getting them in the mindset of, oh, okay, I see the attack surface now. Once they can see that, then we can start going into, now, how do we prevent that? Everything from locking their accounts down. If you look at it again, macro to micro, on the internet. So they have the cloud-based apps, accounts with whether that's your Gmail or whatever it may be. We want to lock all of that down and then go and lock down the phones, or not lock them down per se, but just tighten the screws a little bit to where we're not just willingly hemorrhaging our data. So we do that from cell phones, we go to laptops, then we go into the accounts and make sure there's two-factor authentication. We set up a VPN, a virtual private network that they can use. And then we teach them how to use the VPN to where you not necessarily have to use it all the time, but when you're using, you're wanting to do sensitive browsing, right? Or you're sending information that is sensitive or financial related, maybe use a VPN. I have 3 questions I always tell clients to ask themselves when it comes to VPNs is when you're connecting to the internet, you just ask yourself, is it yours? Is it free? And is it secure? Right. If you can't confidently answer all those questions, then turn on a VPN, or if you have to, right? If you have to connect to the internet, turn on a VPN there. We talk about browser compartmentalization. So, VPNs are great, incognito mode and in private browsing. Everybody likes to think that protects you, whereas, really and truly that doesn't really do a lot, right? That just protects your device or someone looking at your device from the outside in and saying, hey, this person, was looking at whatever. Where, truly be protected, you need to use a VPN. Browser compartmentalization, which is just using 2 or 3 different browsers for very specific things, such as using one browser for sensitive browsing. So that's everything from your Gmail, right? I always put your civilian email. And the reason why the importance is that's generally what you're logging into or logging in with, right? Your email address. Your bank account, I like to throw in telecommunications as well, just because of the whole eSIM and SIM swapping that's going on right now. So protecting those in a browser, using another browser for anything that requires a login or maybe a payment portal, and then another browser for general, I like to say Googling, like how are cups made, the general thought, random consciousness stream, throwing that into something. So we kind of have a holistic approach as to how we teach this each client. But the other part of it is you have to take into consideration the client, right? We have some clients that barely use email, that don't want to use email, and they're not very tech savvy. They just want you to make sure that you're protected. And then we have, the chief technology officers of major corporations that I'll never be able to teach them anything tech related, but I can teach them how to protect themselves in some tradecraft. And so knowing your client and knowing where they fall in that spectrum.
So when you talk about browser compartmentalization, I can't say the word now, compartmentalization. So are you talking about, in layman's terms, I use Google for my general surfing, having a different browser, as in another Google one, or a completely different company to do other things, and then a third company to do something different. Is that what you mean in terms of that?
Yeah,
that sectional.
Chrome has an ability to create different profiles. Firefox has, I believe, what's called compartments that you can use. I tend to just push clients to use 3 different brands, right? So Safari for one thing, Chrome for another, and Edge or whatever else, whatever you like. Brave is also a good one. At 360 Privacy, we have the 360 Secure browser powered by Talon. That we love and we give to clients, and that's kind of what they use for the sensitive browsing. I usually tell them, the 3 browsers can be a lot for some people, and so to make it just much more simple, most people have MacBooks, and so I say, use Safari for your random thoughts and conscious streams and whatnot, and then use the 360 browser for anything that requires a login. Right? Sure. So anything that has a credit card portal, anything that you're logging into, your bank account, stuff like that, using a secure browser that way.
So you mentioned VPN. So let's just kind of unpack that slightly, because again, that's one of the things that lots of people have. I've got VPNs. What does it actually do?
The best way to not get super techie with it is just think of it as an encrypted tunnel between you and your digital destination, right? When you are looking at things without a VPN, let's say your company or a threat actor can see everything from your user agent strings, your IP address, to what you're looking up, where you're looking it up from, all sorts of things. And so when you're using a VPN, it basically just encapsulates it, right? So put it in that tunnel to where people on the onlookers, so it may be your internet service provider, a threat actor, or whomever, they can't really see what you're doing. They can see something's being done, right? You are looking at something, but they're not able to see what you're looking at. And so that's what it's used for on that sense. Obviously, companies use it to be able to VPN into a server, right? You see that a lot from work from home situations now. But the way that we're using it is using it to basically protect yourselves from onlookers from the outside.
And so when I log onto my VPN, it allows me to choose a location.
Mm-hmm.
Now clearly, if I choose certain locations, then the internet doesn't allow me access because they're restricted by nations in terms of, you're outside the US, you can't access this, or you're outside GDPR, you can't access this. So one of the things it does then is it clouds your location about where you're actually based.
Right. It'll be able to, change your IP address to where it's a different country. A lot of times, people try to use it, maybe not anymore. I think they've caught on to it, but when you're traveling internationally and you want to watch your favorite shows back home, right? Netflix, your Amazon Prime or whatever it may be, your Hulu, being able to watch those shows from a different place. That's what you normally see. But then also too, everything from, hey, I need to access certain websites that I can't access in the States, or I need to access certain websites overseas. You can use it that way too. Sure. On the offensive side, on the defensive side, you would use it to obfuscate where you are, what you're looking up. So again, to where if a threat actor is looking, they can say, something's happening. I can't tell what's happening.
Right.
That's what you want. Yeah. If you can't see the credit card information, you're not able to see the logins or, building out that pattern of life on you.
Sure. So I go to a coffee shop and I log on to their Wi-Fi.
Mm-hmm.
What's the risk around that then? How does that make me vulnerable?
So you're on that Wi-Fi and you're on the Wi-Fi with everyone else in there. And so you're now in a shared space, right? Think of it that way. Now you're giving access to your computer and your traffic to not only everyone else that's on that network, but the owners of that network, right? You'd have no idea who is on the backside of that coffee shop, looking at the network traffic. And so 100%, let me ask you those three questions. So you walk in there, is it yours? Is it free? Is it secure? So is it yours? No, it's not. Is it secure? No, there's free Wi-Fi in a coffee shop. And is it free? So if it's free, you are the product.
Yeah.
In general, right?
Yep.
And so if you can't confidently ask or answer those three questions, then use a VPN.
Yeah.
Preferably not to connect to them. But then also there's another threat mechanism there to where you don't really know if that free Wi-Fi actually belongs to the coffee shop. There could be a rogue router, a rogue box, a rogue Wi-Fi for layman's terms, to where someone can throw up their own Wi-Fi, much like you can you can connect to your cell phone, right? A hotspot. I can create a hotspot, call it Starbucks free Wi-Fi, and then just hope someone connects to my phone. Well, now I'm gathering all of their traffic, right? Yep. And so if someone is using a VPN and that happens, again, I can see that they're doing something, but I can't see what they're doing.
And what about when you're connecting via 4G or 5G? How does that change things?
So now you're not connecting to a local router, right? There's not a local host. There's no one local there to monitor that traffic. Now you're throwing it in. Obviously, it has different encryption levels. Most of the time, depending on the country, the telecommunication system is much more scrutinized than anything else. And in some countries, being exploited over Wi-Fi may be a misdemeanor if they're even able to catch you do it. But messing with the telecommunications network, say Verizon, AT&T, and everything, that's essentially an act of war, act of terrorism. And so it's so much more scrutinized that the encryption levels are higher. So I always tell clients, at least in the States or where you can overseas, is to use your hotspot, right? You connect to it. Again, if you are traveling to a country that it's not your home country, just know too that if you are doing that, that whatever you are looking up is being routed through that host network, host nation network. So just some things to keep in mind there.
So when you're traveling and then you're going into a hotel, for instance, you clearly don't want to log into their Wi-Fi because that's a shared Wi-Fi. So are you? I mean, I know there's kind of technical, some of them are logged on, and so it's only guests only and what have you.
Yeah.
But are you? So would you then say, I know that, for instance, you can buy portable Wi-Fi, which you can use your phone for or your laptop or whatever else. Is that something that you recommend in terms of, that as a simple cost, purchase a portable Wi-Fi through your provider and actually keep yourself logged onto that wherever you're going, because then you're getting better security?
Absolutely. I mean, that is a way to do it. But if you think about it, those portable Wi-Fi, those pucks, if you will, that's essentially a cellular. There's a SIM card in there, right? SIM card that's going to be giving you cellular data, right? It's running off of data. And most of the time it's going to be the same as your cell phone provider. One thing to note, if you are going to do that, is because oftentimes you don't have service, right? That's the thing people always say is like, well, what happens if I don't have service? If you go the Wi-Fi puck route, you always want to make sure that provider is different than your cell phone provider.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so if I have Verizon for my cell phone. So if I want to have a secondary or that PACE plan, we're talking about communication stuff now, my secondary option needs to be AT&T or T-Mobile, whoever it may be. So if one is out, I can rely on the other. So that is one thing that's one way to use it. Another way is to, again, use a VPN, right? If you need to use the hotel Wi-Fi, just to use a VPN.
Yeah.
There's no one answer. I like to tell clients, I give them 5 or 6 different options. Think of it like the bike chain, right? And so I don't expect you to do all 5 or 6 things that I teach all the time, because I don't do 5 or 6 things all the time. I'm not a crazy person. But if you do a couple of things right all the time, it's going to drop you just below that threshold, right? Just below, make yourself a hard target to where that threat actor, they'll say, it's too much time and resource. I'm going to go on to the next person. I'm going to go to the next person that's looking up, whatever on free Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
That's what all you want to do is just the whole, you want to be faster than the person next to you if you're being chased by a bear.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier, you look after, celebrities, athletes, etc. So they fall into a different bracket where they may be targeted specifically because of who they are.
Correct.
What changes then? What different things do you advise when you're trying to protect, a high-profile individual?
Much more scrutiny on the devices, right? Making sure that the education piece is much more focused on looking and seeing and making sure that the things that they're doing in their pattern of life is correct, right? They're always being targeted. They're being sent very specific things. And so I always tell them, hey, take a second and just look at it. If you're unsure, have someone else verify. The 5-10 seconds or 5 to 10 minutes that it takes for someone to verify any type of correspondence or an email or anything like that could save you hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars in the long run. And so just getting them to take a breath, right? But then also using certain programs. There's a company called /Next. They have a great malicious link filter that can kind of put on the device to where you can let people live their life and do the things and, essentially click whatever they want to click. And there's an added layer of security around it. So that way, if they do click something, they, they're still protected. So
Sure.
they're trying to build as many walls around them as possible.
So it's a kind of layered security, but for
right.
basic
exactly.
phones. Yeah. And is there specific phones that are more secure than others? I mean, is an iPhone more secure
Absolutely.
than a different phone?
Right. And there's even things there's the secure phones, black phones and stuff like that. Glacier is a great company. They have a great Guardian program to where they have preloaded, essentially secure phones for you. But then I prefer iPhones. I know I'm probably going to get a lot of flack from listeners from that, but that they're easier to lock down. They're easier to adjust settings across the board. If you know what you're doing and you are a very techie person, Android obviously is the preferred for them because they can change their own settings. But with that is, kind of with great power comes great responsibility. If you don't know what you're doing, you can really put yourself in a predicament there to where you're very vulnerable. So I would say to the everyday user, I personally, this is just Ben's personal opinion. I recommend iPhones just because it's easier. It's a good blanket coverage for what they're doing. I actually like what Apple's doing now too with lockdown mode and some of the privacy things. There's some settings you can go through and you can sever an Apple device, an iPhone, from Apple, from taking a lot of your behavioral analytics and your significant locations and stuff like that. It's just much easier to harden, I should say.
And again, I suppose the more apps that you're downloading, the more lifestyle information and other data that you're effectively sharing. So you have to think about, well, what apps am I downloading? What am I giving away?
Exactly. Third-party apps, I want to say I've reading the reports, like 92% of exploits that are coming in right now are all coming from third-party apps, right? You're something you don't have control over, right? You don't know where that information is going. And so just being comfortable with, you are downloading an app and you don't know what's going on the back end. But yeah, you have to be very careful with that, with a third party.
And so a third-party app is what? Is that a non-Apple app? Is that what you're referring?
Yeah. Anything you're downloading to a phone that's not part of the Apple universe.
Right. Yeah. So. Yeah. Okay. So in terms of your high profile clients, and would you steer them away from conventional phones towards these more secure phones, or do you just say, no, you can use a normal phone, but you just need to secure it?
It honestly, it just depends on the client and how secure, how deep they want to go. We have pro athletes and we have, celebrities, pro athletes, high net worth individuals that are very comfortable with just us coming in and locking their personal phone down as much as we can. Again, what's the point of having a smartphone if it doesn't do the smart things? So we're not turning things off, right? We're not turning the whole location services and everything else off because people want to use it. That's why people buy Apple phones, because they are so interconnected. But going through and turning off, we've kind of established a baseline of things that we can turn off and make a regular iPhone as hardened, quote unquote, as you can, and still be able to use all the fun things. Yeah. But then also we have, like I said, for partners at Glacier, to where if they want to go, they're doing some crazy international travel. They want that extra layer of protection. Then by all means, we'll point them and help them through that process of getting an actual secure, quote unquote, secure phone.
And when you're talking about location settings, then, so I mean, yes, we all probably need location settings on some of our settings because that's how they work.
Yeah.
But what we don't need it on is everything, because of course then you're becoming very open and transparent, exactly. And that's when people can start tracking you and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Just doing an audit, right? Oftentimes I'll go into a client's house and first thing we do is let me see who all are you sharing your location with, right? There was a client of mine. We went in and this person had met a colleague at a conference, and basically was like, "Hey, meet me at one of the happy hours, right? RSA conference. All the conferences have the happy hour afterwards, right? Meet me at this happy hour. Okay, I'm sharing my location. I'm here now. I'm just going to show you my location. Just come to me." Well, there's two different options there, where you're permanently sharing location or you're sharing it for an hour or two. And I've seen where you click a button, you don't think about what you're doing, and then this person had for the last year been permanently sharing their location with a colleague of theirs that they didn't realize it, right? So oftentimes just doing an audit, right, playing off of the ignorance and a person being naive to certain things. So just doing an audit of what apps are actually taking your location. I tell clients to do the audit of on location services and seeing, nothing should say always, on the iPhone where it says always, when using or off. When using is perfectly fine. But we have clients too that use I think it's Live 360 and a couple other apps that, tracking the children and stuff like that, where you have to have it on,
Sure.
right? It's that give and take.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, this has been fascinating. And I think it's been really enlightening in terms of, even if you know this stuff, it's always good to get a reminder about, actually, do you know what? When did I last check my phone? When did I last upgrade my phone in terms of the security settings? Because I'm kind of religious about that. I'm always doing it. I have to kind of tell my wife, have you updated your settings?
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that, because that's security updates.
Right. That's the big thing too, is, I know we're getting short on time here, but, two of the biggest things that can help you on the digital space are actually two of the most trivial things, is to update your phone. Make sure that your phone is updated, right? Most of the exploits are known exploits, and they're just targeting older versions of iOS or older versions of the operating system on your computer or your phone. And so just making sure that your phone is updated, making sure apps are updated. And then the most trivial is turn your phone off every now and then, right? Just reset it, turn it off for 5 minutes and then turn it back on. And those, that as a baseline will help you, more than anything right off the bat. It's a good foundation.
Yeah. Well, those are two great tips to finish on, I think, because I don't know anyone who doesn't have a phone these days, and kids seem to get younger and younger with phones. Phones now are like computers. The capability of them now is such that you don't really need an iPad or a laptop if you're carrying around. You can just find everything on your phone and do everything on your phone. So we're glued to the hip by them. And so absolutely. Those simple tips of turning it off every so often to allow it to reset itself, making sure that you've got the latest security done, because it's the reason it's a security update is because I've identified a vulnerability. So there's a clue there.
Yeah, exactly.
And looking at your location services and every so often just going through it to see, well, actually, what have I opened up, or what can I close down that I don't need now, and that'll help keep you safer than you might be. So, Ben, absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. Anything else? Any last piece of genius wisdom that you've kept in your back pocket and you haven't shared with us just yet?
Multi-factor authentication. I think I would be remiss not to mention that in any type of discussion. Is in today's age with technology and some of the exploits that are out there, two-factor authentication isn't a luxury. It's not an option anymore. You got to have it.
Yeah.
Right? If you don't have two-factor on, then you're behind the power curve, and it's irresponsible, honestly. It's in today's age. So two-factor authentication and update your phone.
And what about? Sorry, I know we've kind of finished, but password managers, because I've just done a piece of work on someone. He's got we've identified one person use on about 100 different things he's got. But password managers are so simple to use.
They are very simple to use. And again, going back to the Apple, they have Keychain, which to the everyday user is extremely easy to use. It's very intuitive. And it makes all the difference in the world when you're, trying to come up with different passwords. Third-party password managers are also great. You kind of pick your own flavor on which one's out there. Always pay for one, right? There's a free password managers, free VPNs, free this. But let's go back to just remember, is it yours? Is it free? Is it secure? If it's free, you are the product, right? And so you kind of pay what you get for what you get. So let's try to have some sort of password management system.
Yeah.
But then at the end of the day, though, some people just don't want to do it. It's too cumbersome. And so what I tell clients is, at least have 3 passwords, have one password for you make sure that your, like, say your Gmail password is completely different than anything else. Your banking password is completely different than anything else. And the password to get into your cell phone company login is different. After that, we can go into your discussion on how you should use a password manager. But those three, at bare minimum, I beg people just to make sure those are standalone.
Brilliant. Ben, thank you so much. Yeah. That's been really useful. And I know that people will listen to that and they may not admit that they have learned a lot there because they might think they already know some of this stuff. But I bet you there's people checking their phones, or hopefully going to be people checking their phones and their other devices and following a lot of the advice. So once again, Benjamin Barrontine, we'll put the details of 360 Privacy, a great company based in the US but operate globally. Jam-packed full of experts. We use them, we trust them, and we'd highly recommend them to other people as well. Great to have you on again, and great to spend some time with you. Once again, thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Defuse Podcast with host Philip Grindell, CEO and founder of Defuse. Please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcasting platforms.